Hey everybody, in this video we'll be learning how to implement arrays in Cairo. Unlike Python where you just put two square brackets and you're pretty much done with implementing an array, implementing the same in Cairo can be a little challenging. In order to understand the process of implementing an array in Cairo, let's first understand what is an alloc. Because that's probably the first thing that you would notice in this code as well, that you're just starting off with using this alloc to maybe a variable, and that's majorly how it starts. So alloc is a function that helps us allocate a block of memory to store our values. So let's say you wanted to store a value 9. In order to store it, you basically call the function alloc, and alloc will basically give you an address that is free. And in this address, you can put the value 9. So whenever you're going to basically ask your compiler to give that address will basically have your value 9. And a good real life example for this question would be when I was a kid, I used to carry food to my school, and I used to portion the food and say my friends that this part or block of the food belongs to me, and the rest of it maybe you can eat. So that's maybe a little bit of analogous to your real world life in case if such an incident happened to you. So using allocs, you kind of say that, hey, give me a block of memory, and you just go about storing your values inside it. And just to explain it much more clearly, let us say that whatever we have on the right is a section of memory that's available to us, and each of these partitions are 1 byte. And all of these bytes in the memory has an address, as everybody knows. And let us also say that the bottom of this basic segment is basically starting from 500, and then the next byte is 501, and then we go increasing to the top. Now, when I ask alloc to give me a block that is free, right? Like what we have written in this specific code, what it is going to give me is basically the free address. And let's say in this example on the right section, it might be maybe 504. It might be giving me the address 504. And what I'm basically doing is I'm taking the 504 address and I'm just putting it inside this array address variable, or the pointer, to be much more precise. So how do you use pointers is just put a felt and you just put a star at the next, just to say that, see, this is a pointer. Now, when you're going to basically, let's say serialize underscore word and probably put array underscore address, it's ideally just going to not give you anything because, there is no value that is currently being stored in that specific address, which is maybe 504, for example. And if I'm just going to print it out, you're just going to get an error saying that unknown value for memory cell. Now, in order to, put a value inside that address, what you basically do is just say assert and just put a square bracket, and inside that just put your array address. And in this address, you want to store the value, maybe 9. Now when I'm going to run this specific program, I'm just going to be returned with the value 9. So what if we wanted to add much more elements inside this array? In Python, it will be .append, and maybe in JavaScript it will be .push or something. In Cairo, it's something like very similar to C, and what you basically do is something that you've already guessed, probably. So you just say, so this is the address, which is 504, and I want to store the next number in the next byte. So I say array address plus 1 is equal to maybe a number of 5. Now, this is going to basically have the data 5 on the next, as the next index of the array. Now, if I'm going to, maybe call array address of 1, it's going to return me the value 5. So this can be one way of, instantiating arrays with an arbitrary length. Let's say you're not sure about what the length of the array would be, then this is how you basically proceed with. But in the off chance that you already know what would be the size of an array, then you can instantiate something like a tuple. So how do you basically go about doing it is very, very simple. You just say temp var, and this temp var is just considered probably the variable name to be array, and then I'm just putting the type, and the type is going to be a pointer, and I'm just going to say new, and inside this I'm just going to be 5. So what it essentially does is it takes this array and it takes this tuple, and whatever is the address of the tuple, it just puts it inside the array. Now when you, basically like it's when you're basically going to like ask or use serialized word and call for this specific array, is going to like give you the value which is there in that specific index. So this is 0 and this is 1. So if we basically do array of 1, then you might be return the value 2, because this is the first position of an array, because array is starting 0. Yeah. So this is majorly how you use arrays in let's say Cairo. And maybe another step on top of this would be around how you can sum using arrays. So now let's look at it. In order to sum an array, what we're using here is a property called as recursion. And what is recursion? Recursion is something that basically repeats itself, like a Russian doll, right? Like when you have a Russian doll, you just open it into multiple pieces. As you open, you find smaller, like the dolls inside it, until you actually find the smallest one. So that's majorly a little about recursion by itself. And in order to understand the recursion in this specific program, let's just use the debug tool, because that kind of helps in a very long way. So once we do debug, we can actually first find the pointer that's allocated initially, and the address is basically going to be 104. And after this, it's going to say that the array which we have is basically given an address 54. And now we are actually going to get started with the recursion process. Now when we go to the array sum, what we're going to do is the array sum is going to take the array, which is 1 2 3 4 5, and the length of the array, which is 5, and then first it's going to check if the size is equal to 0. And since the size is not equal to 0, then it's basically going to sum in the same function again, but just increasing like the pointer from 54 to 55, so that you're able to get the value which is there in 54th address. And then of course reduce the size of the array by 1, because like you have already received the value of the 54th array. Now you have to reduce it by 1 because you're moving to the next address that is there. So if you can watch this specific area, we can actually find that things very precisely. So if I just go here, and it's just going to say array plus 1, which is basically 55, and the size minus 1 would be 4. So when it basically calls this complete function, what's going to happen is it's just going to say, yeah, there you go. So it's just going to say it's 56 and 3, and now after some time this would be 57 and 2, because again it's just increasing the counter, and then the size is increased by 1, and then again this will be 58 and 1, because it's just going on to the next part of the array. And similarly, it's just going to keep on summing up all of these things, and at the end of the day the size becomes 1 minus 1, which is 0. And what basically happens is this return statement that's over here basically ends the recursion. Just like the Russian doll scenario, where once after you reach the smallest doll, you cannot basically continue, and either you can just go and play with the dolls which you have got, or maybe just put them back into the case. Similarly, we just go to the return function over here, and we just add it from a top-down approach. So we add it from 5, 4, 3, 2, and then later the first part of the array. So we can also specifically see that in this part. So it just takes the addition of array plus some of the rest, which is basically 5, and then you can actually see that 4 would be called because the next specific element in the array is 4, and after that it's going to be 3, and after that it's going to be 2, and after that it's going to be 1. So at the end of the day, it's just going to say that the value of A is going to be 15, and you get the addition as the output of the program, which is basically given to you by the serial while word function built in, which basically throws out the value 15 because that was basically what was stored in that specific address. So this is majorly about summing up arrays and also how you can utilize arrays on Cairo. And in case if you might have any doubts or feedbacks, or maybe some improvisations which you might have for my videos, please feel free to drop them on the comment section below, and I'm really looking forward to it. So probably in the next tutorial we'll learn much more things, and until then, tada, bye bye.